Let's go to our guests in London. They include Conservative Party activist Ali Fazel and the co-founder of the Islamic Human Rights Commission, Arzu Merali, as well. Thanks for joining us, Ali. So 15 Tory councillors, they get suspended over anti-Muslim comments, over racist comments, and then, I don't know, they take a couple weeks off and they're quietly reinstated. Does it show us that the Tories are not serious about anti-Muslim sentiment in the party?
Well, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I mean, as soon as these claims of Islamophobia came out, Brandon Lewis, the Conservative Party chairman, was very quick, very swift to act on these Islamophobic comments that were made. He made it very clear right from the very start that there is no place for Islamophobia in our party. When he became chairman, he implemented the Respect Pledge, which set a very high bar in terms of how we use political language and the responsibility that we need to have when we talk about political issues. So I think we've seen some very strong leadership on this case from the Conservative Party. These councillors who were suspended had clearly said something wrong. We made it very clear that there is no place for this in the Conservative Party. They had their correct training before they were
But help me understand what that training was. Okay, so Ali, right. Okay, because they were quietly reinstated and it only took a Guardian investigation for us to find out that they were actually reinstated. So what was it? Did they just go away and every morning they drank a pro-Muslim smoothie in the morning and suddenly they came back and all the Islamophobia went away? Like, what was the training? What happened to them during that process to give us the confidence that they could be councillors again without bigotry?
Well, Imran, you'll know as well as I do that a lot of these investigations are kept confidential because it is the nature of these sorts of investigations, for the sake of people to be able to come out freely and express how they feel about them, that it is quite important that they're kept confidential. So, of course, we will not know the full extent of the training which they received, but I'm confident in the leadership in the sense that when these statements were made by these individuals, Brandon Lewis, the Prime Minister, and everybody in the leadership of the Conservative Party was very, very upfront about it.
Okay,
there is no
but are you
space
confident
for Islamophobia in the party?
Okay, are you confident that those councillors who called Muslims cavemen and sand peasants and so on were properly reformed in their 2 or 3 week timeout?
Well, I think first and foremost, what I think they've realised is that within our party, within the Conservative Party, there is zero space for intolerance towards Muslims and any religious groups at all, and that has been made very clear to them.
Okay.
Now that they've come back to the party, I'm sure that they will bear that in mind and carry on moving towards championing the Conservative cause in that goodwill nature.
Okay, Arzu, there's zero space for intolerance within the Conservative Party. This is coming from Ali, who's a Tory Muslim. He has faith in the system that it will sort out the bad apples. What do you think?
I think you used a very important word there in that system. I think there are a couple of issues really with what's been going on. We can go endlessly into the minutiae of disciplinary processes and individual cases. And unfortunately, you know, these people were picked up, but it's not like these are the only complaints that have happened. You've got high-profile figures like Baroness Warsi saying, you know, this is like a kind of normal experience for her to kind of put up with these types of comments, etc., from membership, from senior figures within the party. You've got someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg endorsing the leader of AfD in Germany, who's made the most outrageous anti-Islam, anti-Muslim remarks. And, you know, let's be honest, their policies are not far behind. So it's not just about individual cases, it's about the system. Why is it that we don't have a kind of, you know, in-depth structural understanding that some things are just beyond the pale? And quite honestly, as someone of my age, we did have this about 15, 20 years ago in the kind of equalities lexicon and culture of this country. Why are we going so fast backwards?
Okay, so Arzu, let me pose this to you then. Along the political spectrum, on the right, you're bound to find on the fringes on the right a lot of people who hold racist views. That's just basically how it is everywhere, right? And on the left, on the fringes, you're quite likely to find people who say, eat the rich, and so on, right? Is this a case of people on the fringes, or is it a case of the mainstream of the Tories being systemically anti-Muslim and Islamophobic? Because what we hear from Ali is that this isn't systemic. Address that.
Yeah, I think we have to really look at Islamophobia within a sort of a set of societal problems that we have, which include all different forms of racism. but also other types of marginalization, for example, the demonization of poor people, etc. And increasingly, and I'm not talking about 5 years, I'm talking about 15, 20 years, we're seeing these discourses across the mainstream of the right and the left, or the so-called left. So, it's not about fringes anymore. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. This is not about the skinheads chasing you down the streets of North London. This is about that type of idea being replicated on a grand scale. Now, look, racism has never gone away. It's embedded in the core of this in many countries around the world, particularly former colonial powers, who haven't really kind of gotten rid of their, the hierarchical structuring of their societies according to many issues, but particularly race. But it's now very open in the way it's being expressed. We thought we'd gotten away from the time of Enoch Powell and Rivers of Blood speeches, but especially since Brexit, we're having a kind of, onslaught again of this type of language and imagery and tropes in the United Kingdom, a place which, as I mentioned, for a while at least, had managed to suppress that type of language, had made it at least in the public taboo.
Okay, so Ali, the Conservatives are in power. They've mainstreamed bigotry and they've brought back stuff that should have been put away a long time ago. That's the word from Arzu. What do you say?
I mean, I fundamentally have to disagree with that point of view. I have been a member of the Conservative Party for almost 4 years now. In my time as someone who goes out campaigning every other week, as someone who has stood as stood for local council, and as someone who wishes to carry on contributing to the party, never in my time in the Conservative Party have I ever felt not welcome, or have I felt that I've been treated unfairly because of my religion. And I think it's all well and good us here, on this news channel talking about Islamophobia in the Conservative Party. But why don't we actually ask conservative Muslims and the grassroots? And I totally understand, and I have a lot of respect for Baroness Warsi, but I'm afraid I disagree with her on this issue. And I think if you ask Muslims across the Conservative Party how they feel about their leadership and how they feel about being Muslims in the Conservative Party, I don't think you'll find that any of them find those two things to be contradictory
but Ali,
in any
would you
way
accept,
at all.
okay, so even if it's not absolutely coming from the leadership, let's talk about it a little bit in terms of the voting public, those who would tend to vote Conservative. When it comes to someone like Sadiq Khan, right? A lot of the time, it seems as if a lot of these people just can't handle the fact that a liberal, Labour, Muslim mayor is taking care of London. Very similarly to the rise of the right wing in the United States when Barack Obama was the president, right? Would you agree that there's been a racist backlash against someone like Sadiq Khan, and invariably it's come from people who would vote Tory?
I see where you're coming from. I see where you're coming from. However, on that second point, I would disagree with you. We don't know whether these people are actually Conservative voters. We don't know whether they will actually vote for there'd be members of our party either. I would agree with you there that there is definitely a problem in this country that we have got with Islamophobia, as we do with other forms of religious hatred like anti-Semitism. Right. But what is important is to understand that institutionally, the Conservative Party is not an Islamophobic party. Perhaps there have existed in the past some bad apples who perhaps give us a bad name, who have said some things that are wrong, that fundamentally go against what it means to be a conservative. And I can say from the bottom of my heart that I am very pleased with the action that the leadership of my party has taken to cast these people out and say that actually there's no space for this in the party and we won't stand for it. So I'm pleased to see that. But also when we talk about religious discrimination in political parties, we cannot sit here and talk about Islamophobia and not address other forms of religious discrimination that happen, like anti-Semitism in other parties.
That's true. And look, I'm not going to accuse you of. I'm not going to accuse you of whataboutery because
trying to divert the subject.
Right. Okay,
yes.
fair enough. I'm not going to accuse you of that because usually when people do that, they do it as their first response. But it's fair, I guess, to ask someone like Arzu, is this similar among the Tories to what we saw? And we've done segments dedicated to the question of anti-Semitism within Labour, right? Is this similar to the debate of alleged anti-Semitism within Labour, Arzu?
I don't think it's anywhere near that. And I think we've got to sort of stop making this kind of equivalence when there's completely different things going on. Now, actually, I just wanted to say that I don't think that this is a Conservative-specific problem. I think it's societal. I think it cuts across the political spectrum. And I don't think it started with the Conservative government in its latest phase or even the Condemn coalition. I think New Labour were instrumental in kind of fomenting what we call an environment of hate against Muslims, and that comes through policy, through political discourse, through the kind of anti-terrorism immigration laws they've brought in, etc., etc. Now, Ali, I'm glad you're very happy to be a member of the Conservative Party, and more power to you, but I think you need to have higher expectations of the disciplinary process. You know, I mean, these people were reinstated quietly. There's been no kind of public acknowledgement from them of what they've done, no contrition. And, you know, it was all hidden, so it gives you a really bad taste in the mouth. It may well be that they're completely reformed, but for people who are the victims of what they said, which is effectively all Muslims and people with, you know, basic sensibilities, there's no sort of redress, and that's very, very important. But on a grander scale here, we're not really even touching the sort of, you know, the tip of the iceberg with what's happening in the Conservative Party, simply because there isn't this acknowledgement about structural issues. You know, Lord Macpherson, who brought up this issue of the metropolitan or the police forces across the country being institutionally racist 25 years ago or more, excuse me, was himself of a conservative background. Okay, this is not something to shy away from. This is not, you know, something that's even deliberate on the part of many members. But it's something there that we need to address across different sectors of society. It's nothing to be so defensive or embarrassed about. But let's take this another step back and go, okay, we're talking about leadership here. You have figures like Michael Gove, who wrote Celsius 9/11, who has, you know, pushed this ridiculous idea of a quote-unquote Islamic Trojan horse plot, blah, 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 which, you know, in the words of Professor John Homewood and Professor Teresa O'Toole have said, is a travesty of justice on the scale of Hillsborough, who are possibly going to be new leaders of the party. You know, this is not something we can really escape from. And I don't think it's consonant with what's happening in the Labour Party. You have a whole different set of things going on there. And I think that, you know, it's irrelevant to even compare them.
Ali?
I mean, I have to disagree. If we're looking at religious discrimination, we cannot look at one and ignore the other. We have to be very fair in the way we do this. And I can look at my government, my party, and my front bench and say, actually, I think what they're doing is actually quite good. And I think that I can look at them and say, I don't think any of the front bench of the Conservative Party sit there and are inherently Islamophobic. Whether the same can be said about anti-Semitism in other parties, and whether enough action has been taken in that sense, I don't know whether that can be said. And we need to be very fair in the way we look at this, because at the end of the day, we cannot place one above the other. At the end of the day, these are both forms of religious discrimination that need to be stamped out in every way possible.
But when we discuss this, when we discuss this at the very top, Ali, you agree that that sort of punishment that they had, if we can call it that, was not good enough, right? Because you yourself, you're investing a lot of trust in the process that something good might have happened during those few weeks that they had a timeout, but you don't know. So just by saying, well, Labour didn't do much about accusations of anti-Semitism, that doesn't mean
that's not necessarily what I'm saying.
That doesn't necessarily mean that the Tories have done a good thing here, right?
No. That's not the point I was making. The point I was making was the one that was being discussed about anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and whether those two can be compared in the different parties. But what you say, I go back to the point I made earlier. This is a confidential process. That is the nature of investigations. If every stage of this was transparent, then we would not have the quality of an investigation that we need to have for cases like this.
But we're not talking about a crime scene.
These
we're
are
not talking about a crime scene. We're talking about somebody going on Twitter.
These are situations.
We're talking about somebody going on Twitter saying, you've clearly not experienced the Pakistani hospitality, having a daughter raped by men who think she's white trash. We have people calling Muslims cavemen and so on. We're not talking about forensic crime scene investigation, right? Afterwards, why haven't we heard these politicians come out and say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, I messed up? We don't hear any of that.
Now, while I've not gone to check on the Twitter accounts of each and every one of those 15 individuals, I have come across apologies from some of these individuals who have said that actually what I said was absolutely unacceptable, and I will move on from this point having understood that what I've done is not okay and is not within the ethos of the Conservative Party, or is not within the ethos of what it means to be British, full stop. So if it means that these individuals have gone away, have pondered, have reflected upon what they've said, and are now coming back as individuals who now understand that this sort of thing is totally not okay and has no place in the Conservative Party, then I am okay with them understanding, appreciating that fact, and moving forward from here. Of course, it's not going to be, you know, a potion, like you call it, or a one-night thing where they wake up the next morning and think and be totally different people. But it's a process. And what is better? I think, and this is quite an important distinction to make, is it better for someone to be thrown out and totally forgotten about forever because they've said one thing and perhaps animosity increases?
What if that one thing is
for them
deeply
to go
racist?
away, or go away, have the proper training, know that what they've said is totally unacceptable, there is no place for that in our society, come back as individuals who are looking for a fresh start to renew their understanding of Muslims across Britain, and actually try and actually change the way in which they've dealt with issues like this in the past. And I think it's the latter.
Okay. The latter, Arzu, do you trust the Tories to investigate and reform themselves?
Well, I think when I'm waiting for Michael Gove to have the relevant training, Jacob Rees-Mogg and some of the other senior figures, Boris Johnson, etc., in some ways I feel kind of almost like we're scapegoating these guys at the level who are quietly reinstated because they're not the biggest problem. They're, if you like, a manifestation at a lower level of the hierarchy of what's really kind of being spewed out at the top of it, with all due respect. And I think that's why, you know, when we're getting bogged down with these cases, as much as there hasn't been the right amount of public acknowledgement of what's been done, you know, we have a bigger problem here. We have a much bigger problem at the top of the Tory party that we really need to be talking about.
Okay.
At the end of the day, you know, grave injustices were done in the Trojan horse case, and I've not heard a peep out of Michael Gove to acknowledge anything that's gone wrong.
Can I just add?
Very briefly, please, Ali.
Can I just add? Yeah, so can I just add the fact that, so some of the members who are sort of seen to be saying these Islamophobic comments were in a group, like mentioned earlier, that was a Jacob Rees-Mogg support group. Jacob Rees-Mogg stood up and actually said that he in no way endorses the comments that were made by these individuals. There is no place for Islamophobia in the Conservative Party. He himself stood up and said these things. But also, we have a choice here. We have a choice here, and it's up to one nation, good, you know, moderate, progressive Conservatives across my party to stand up, as they are doing at the moment, to say that actually the Muslims do have a place in the Conservative Party. It should be the natural home for the Muslims, and it's down for us to take that message out to the Muslim community. I can see why some of them might not be happy with the way things are at the moment, but it's down to us, and it's down, I suppose, it's down to the moderates and the you know, the One Nation Conservatives to take that message out and make it very clear that we are a tolerant party and we do have a space for all religious groups within our party.
Okay. Arzu, I tell you what, the sort of chummying with the AFD and so on, maybe let's save that for another segment, because that's fascinating as well across Europe, looking at those links. But I'm out of time. It's been a pleasure talking to both of you, Arzu Merali and Ali Fazel.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.